Hello, I'm Tony Vlahos for ExecuNet. Looking for a new job is really hard work. It can be all consuming and stressful for sure, especially if you're not prepared and don't have a clue where to start. One way you can manage the stress is to break it down into small, manageable steps. So, joining me to talk about how you can get job search ready in 21 days is Harriette Lowenthal. Harriette is a widely respected senior executive career coach and a part of the esteemed career strategy group here at ExecuNet. Harriette, hello.
Hello, Tony. How are you?
I'm well. It's good to see you again.
Good, you as well.
So let's jump into it, Harriette. We're going to share approaches to help executives organize their search and shift it forward during the next 21 days. So, what's the first thing on the list, the thing you begin doing on, say, day one?
Day one, I would advise our executives to press pause for a moment. And by that, I mean you really need to do a self assessment of where am I? What am I looking for? What is my branding and positioning strategy? Do I have the right connections? Am I targeting the right opportunities? And do I have a strategy? So it's going from ready, fire, aim, which is what most people do in job search, to ready, aim, fire. And pressing pause provides an opportunity to regroup, to address the questions that I mentioned, and sometimes even with help in doing so.
Mhm. So that's day one, and that is a great place to start. What happens after the first day and you've got your head around the things that you just outlined for us? What's the next step?
Well, sometimes, in all fairness, what I mentioned does take longer, obviously, than one day. But pressing pause and really thinking about what is it that I'm aiming for, or what is my marketplace, what is my target market, and secondarily, who am I and what is my strategy to reach that target market, those individuals that I need to reach out to. And thirdly, then figuring out what is my branding and positioning, if you will, for product me, and then having a strategy to go about that. So realistically, that can take more than one day.
Sure.
Once that's determined, then the next, like any other marketing strategy or any other product or service that you're thinking about, I need to have my personal collateral. Now, obviously, in job search, that would include a resume and a LinkedIn profile or an ExecuNet profile at a minimum. But in addition to that, really thinking about some creative ways that I can reach my target audience.
Mhm. Where, Harriet, does looking at job boards figure into the early part of a search, if at all? And how would you use them, or how would you recommend our audience use those boards early on?
Well, job boards can be very useful in helping someone determine what their target should be. They can research by position or sometimes research more broadly by company and learn about culture, what's out there, what are the titles, those sorts of things. So it can provide great insight on the front end in terms of identifying the target. And at that point, you're making lists of positions, lists of companies, lists of contacts. On the other side, then, obviously, there's how do I get in the door for those positions or companies that I've identified once you have made that determination and your collateral is organized.
Mhm. So we have looked at some boards. We have already formed our story. We've
Yes.
begun to project it through our marketing collateral, which includes our resume and
Right.
other materials, our LinkedIn profile. Talk to me, please, about how we segue from that to what we typically call networking, where we want our inner circle as well as our weaker ties to understand not just who we are, but the
Right.
fact that we're looking for a job. How do we do that? And what's the unit of time, if you could pin that down for me?
Right. So I like sometimes to use the analogy of the college triage process. You can tell I have three children who've gone through this. So if you think about organizing your contacts aligned with the possible positions for the likelies, the possibles, and the reaches. So
Mm,
the likelies would be those individuals within your inner circle or those who know you well, and or identifying positions or targets, companies, where you feel there's the best alignment. That's where you want to spend your time. So that's your priority. So for the next several days, it's reaching out to those individuals first, and then moving on to the possibles, and then finally the reaches. I
mm,
think one mistake that executives sometimes make is the target is too broad initially, and that can be overwhelming. So if you've triaged them in some way and organized who you're going to reach out to and when, and making sure that you've exhausted those resources as follow-up, then you can move on to the others. It's just like, as Pat Romboletti, one of our coaches, has said before in her webinars and talking about LinkedIn, whether virtual or in person, when you walk into a networking situation, you're immediately drawn by, or excuse me, drawn toward those individuals who you know or who you feel you may have something in common with. And then from there, you move on. So it's the same precedence that you can have when you're thinking about how do I go about this search? Start with those you know or those you feel you have some connection to, i.e., qualifying for a job, and then go beyond that.
mhm. Now, it's a temptation for every executive in search early on to alert every recruiter they can think of, whether they know them or not, to the fact that they are available. Because, of course, the impression that executives often have is if I just let them know I'm available, they'll present me with a job. So,
Yeah.
how would you advise an executive in search in the early part of the process to begin networking with executive search firm consultants or corporate recruiters to alert them to the fact that they exist?
Yes, well, truth be known, an executive recruiter is only going to be interested in a potential candidate if they have an exclusive retained search and you happen to fall on their plate, so to speak, either through your own proactive means or sometimes reactive, meaning they discover you on your profile or some such thing.
Mhm.
So once that happens, then they're going to be interested. Beyond that, connecting with executive recruiters sometimes is difficult. Keep in mind that the relationship is reciprocal, and it is a relationship. So perhaps you know of someone, you see a position that they're posting, you write them in that regard, or perhaps saying, I have been an executive in your vertical or industry for X number of years, and I believe I have individuals that I might be able to refer to you. So sometimes it's really delaying the fact that I'm in job search mode and I'm looking for a job. It can be even sending an article about a company or about the industry where you feel that recruiter might be interested. So, gone are the days where recruiters are keeping files, if you will, of paper resumes. They tend to go on LinkedIn or other resources like an ExecuNet to find potential candidates when they have an active assignment.
Mhm. So I think we've done a really good job so far of listing the things that need to happen in the early going of the job search process.
Right.
Can you talk to me, Harriet, please, a little bit about how executives could structure their day to day? In other words, possibly in units of time, what they need to spend their days doing and what they should spend their days doing less of.
Yes, so that no doubt you're going to go in job search mode and look on perhaps opportunities that have come to them overnight by email or whatever. They're going to go and do a job search. So I would say go ahead and do that. You never know what may pop up on the job boards. However, please know that only 15% or so of executives tell us that that's how they find their next opportunity. Most of them tell us that it's by direct or indirect referral. So the bulk of your time needs to be spent networking. That can be face-to-face, that can be virtual, that can be in groups, or sometimes even having exploratory meetings or conversations. The other is spending time adding one or two new individuals to your network who you may not know. It could be a recruiter, it could be an executive at another firm, but really broadening your network, because the more people you have in your network, it increases the chances of being found or also finding a connection. And one last one would be to look at groups. What groups, interest groups or affinity groups, should you be connected to or a member of? And please do not exclude the personal or community-based groups. Sometimes it's that United Way is an example, connection that you share with someone that may lead to an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful idea. I want to dial back to networking just for a moment, Harriette.
Yes.
Can you give us some help around how to ensure our networking is, I'll say, purposeful? For example, it's very easy again to decide I'm going to write to someone I know very well or not very well and tell them
Yes.
something. But then you want a conversation, some kind of dialogue to ensue from there so that at the end of your unit of networking time with that particular individual, ideally you've achieved some kind of outcome that moves you forward.
Right.
What advice would you have for our audience to engage in that purposeful networking that isn't simply about letting people know, hey, I'm looking for a job?
Yes, so networking can have a different purpose. As I mentioned before, it could be an article that you've read or whatever. Sometimes it's we have a shared connection. So think about the reciprocity. What can you give the other individual to create an interest in connecting with you? Sometimes I've written, for example, commented on an article that pops up in one of my feeds, and someone else may have commented back. I might reach out to that person directly and say, we shared the same perspective, or I really like the different perspective that you shared. It really caused me to ask a lot of questions of myself, and I'd like to add you to my network. So all of a sudden, you're having a conversation with someone who you may not know and may not be in your network, and then proceed to asking about other sorts of things that may lead to something. The
Mhm.
other is we have from time to time individuals who will go into an organization or a situation to address or solve a problem, or perhaps help that organization to pursue an opportunity. So yes, I'm talking about a short-term consulting engagement or that sort of thing. And there are times where that has led to an in-house role. So see yourself not just in job search, but also someone that can help an organization solve its problems or pursue its opportunities.
Mhm. On that topic, Harriet, you've coached, of course, so many executives to a new role. Do you find that many spend as much time as they really need to researching the organizations that ultimately they want to work for? Or said differently, would you advise that we spend more time earlier in the process trying to see whether there's a fit culturally or in terms of goals, our personal goals and the organization's goals? Can you address that, please?
Yes, absolutely. Job fit, location fit, organization fit, all of those are factors that help to determine certainly why someone is hired, but also the success of an individual once they join a company.
Hmm.
So when we do interview coaching, as an example, we spend an awful lot of time talking about doing due diligence on the organization, not just its performance, but really looking at what their mission and values are, what might be published information, be they articles or blogs or sometimes video presentations by their executives. Certainly reading reviews about the company and what others have said, knowing their products and services, and then turning that attention to the individuals who are going to interview you,
Mm-hmm.
um, and looking at their profiles and finding out information about them. So all of those sorts of things really factor around what can you find out not only about the products and services, but about the company, what they value, about the individuals, what they value, and asking yourself the question, is this a fit for me? Does this align for me? If it means relocation, doing very much the same on the community and the location.
Mm-hmm.
Can I see myself and my family living here? And those sorts of things. So it's not just waiting until the offer is on the table to do so, but really doing that from the very beginning. I talk to individuals all the time who, even after the first phone interview or sometimes the first face to face, they will say, I can't see myself working here.
Mm,
So it's a two-way street when it comes to fit.
absolutely. Okay, one more thought about maintaining your presence online. This is a question I get a lot from our members who have LinkedIn profiles, have a presence, a profile, for example, on ExecuNet or even on Facebook, and
Right?
yet are wondering what more they can do to ensure that the world knows they are, in fact, present online.
Yes.
What I often say to them is, well, you can write something, you can let people know what you know. Elaborate, please. Am I on the right track when I'm giving that piece of
So
advice? Okay.
Well, in today's world, our digital footprints are very important and they can come in a number of different ways. So it really is up to the individual to think about to what extent do they want to make that commitment. So certainly having a robust and interesting, up-to-date profile is important. But even things like I mentioned before, commenting on an article sometimes
Mhm.
can gain attention. It doesn't have to be something that you authored. Now, obviously, if we're wanting to brand and position our expertise, and that's part of our strategy, one way of doing that is to write an article, or I have individuals who take it to YouTube and really share their thoughts on certain things. Committing to utilizing Twitter or blogging or whatever is just that. If you are going to do so, you really have to be willing to keep up with it. So whether it's daily or weekly or monthly, for example, that you're planning to write a blog, then you must communicate that as part of that blog to let people know how often you will be posting, and you must be committed to keeping up with that. Otherwise, my advice is don't start that because you'll be gone all of a sudden and you won't be current in terms of what you're posting. You're better off using one of the other alternatives.
Good advice. Well, we've covered a lot of territory in a short period of time, and I think we've told our audience how to get job search ready in 21 days. What do you think?
I think we can. And one thing that I will leave you with is we want to make sure that our executives are leveraging their past, but marketing their potential in the marketplace.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Harriette.